Welcome to the first show of 2025. All of the teleconnections lining up for a significant push of Arctic air, slowing of the North Atlantic Oscillation, the PNA going positive, Arctic Oscillation slowing down, that allows for more buckling of the jet stream. The Madden-Julian Oscillation Index, not really an ideal number yet. We want to see that more towards 1, 2, or 3, so that should check the developing weather pattern, but still looks interesting for next week. Here's our situation this afternoon. We've already got a couple of pushes of polar air southward. This is a track of anticyclones coming out of Canada into the eastern U.S. However, on the high plains, we do have southerly flow starting to get established. But in between, an Alberta Clipper developing in western Nebraska that will track into parts of the Corn Belt later tonight and into tomorrow. Elsewhere, we've got a weather system off the Atlantic, bringing cold advection through much of the northeastern U.S. and down into Florida as well. On the west coast, indeterminate weather, but we look at that thickness pattern and we do have indications of a baroclinic zone across that area right ahead of this Pacific weather system. Let's take a look at the 500 millibar chart, the heights, vorticity, and winds. Jet max moving across Idaho around midday today. A couple of short waves embedded in the flow, and those are pretty much headed for Nebraska and Iowa during the overnight hours. By 7 a.m., strong area of upper level lift around Kansas City, Des Moines, and Omaha, and those lead short waves further out to the east. Then we go into later tomorrow and tomorrow night. Those short waves kind of shear out into this channeled flow, another band up to the north, and still lots of energy upstream in the high plains. This is how things look for the rest of the week. A strong ridge developing across the Rockies, very strong trough in California for Friday night and Saturday, and that next trough moves out into the Great Plains for Sunday. So a continuation of this rather dynamic weather, and of course with polar air in place, that means some areas are going to get some wintry weather. There's a quick look at the forecast for this weekend. Potent area of baroclinic development, overrunning isentropic lift developing across Kansas, mixed precipitation forms, and a corridor of snow from about Omaha, Kansas City, out towards Indianapolis. Checking out the weather in the northeastern U.S., another outgoing weather system in Quebec and the Maritimes. The warm conveyor belt well out to the east, and we've got the cold air advection flowing in. Temperatures today rather mild for this kind of pattern. A lot of recirculated maritime polar air, highs above freezing nearly everywhere, 30s in New England and 50s along the coast. For today, a large wind advisory across the northeastern corridor from Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, down the Blue Ridge Mountains. West winds gusting to 50 miles an hour. Winter storm warning through Friday night for the Adirondacks and the northern mountains of Vermont, about 6 to 14 inches possible. Winter weather advisories in the higher elevations of New England, including Montpelier and Bennington. However, in Plattsburgh, Burlington, Lake Champlain, I didn't really see anything issued at this time. However, the lake effect snow warnings are out for Lake Ontario today, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 2 to 4 feet in a prolonged event, 40-mile-an-hour winds, blowing snow, drifting snow. That's going to affect mostly this area from just east of Rochester to Syracuse, Oswego, Utica, and Watertown. Also, the Lake Erie snowbelt will be active during the same dates, 1 to 3 feet, 40-mile-an-hour winds, and that will affect everywhere from Cleveland up to Hamburg, New York. In the southeastern U.S., fair skies until you get up north into the bulk of that cold air advection. A lot of stratocumulus and stratus up there in Tennessee and Kentucky. Those wind advisories do extend down the Blue Ridge Mountains. The winds will be dying off through the remainder of the day. I think some of those wind advisories may have expired already. Temperatures this afternoon ranging from the 30s in Tennessee. We get into the sunshine. They pick up into the 50s across Georgia, the Carolinas, and Alabama, and warm up into the 60s, 70s, and even 80s in Florida. 80 down there at Miami. Likewise, across Texas and the southern plains, fair skies predominated, highs in the 40s in Oklahoma and up to the 60s in much of Texas. A little bit of stratus and fog hanging on around Dalhart, Tucumcari, Clovis, and so on. Otherwise, a little bit of cirrus moving in from the west. In the northern plains, bitter cold has shown up once again in North Dakota. It's like a broken record. Single digits up north for highs, and we get around Bismarck, highs are right around 20. In Minnesota, they range from 11 for an afternoon high to 28 down in the southwest part of the state. The warm weather has disappeared on the high plains. We were looking at a high of 43 at Denver, 30 for Billings, so maybe about a 10 to 15 degree cool down as that Canadian air expands westward. And of course, we've got that Alberta Clipper. Not much sign of it right now, but if you take a closer look out there in Montana, picking up that mid and high cloud. And sometimes this is more evident on the water vapor imagery. And there it is. Disturbance dropping out of Montana, that S shape on the backside of that wave, indicating the presence of upper dynamics and possibly the jet max as well. So that is what's heading for the high plains and the northern plains and the Corn Belt for tonight. In the Colorado Rockies, a winter storm warning continues for yet another day. East of Steamboat Springs, 8 to 16 inches, mostly above 8,000. Winter weather advisories all through the central Colorado Rockies up into the north part of the state today and tomorrow, 5 to 12 inches, again above 8,000 feet. In the southwestern U.S., fair skies, mild conditions, temperatures ranging from the lower 70s in the deserts to 30s and 40s in the Great Basin. Highs today, Salt Lake City, 40 degrees, Phoenix, 73, and Los Angeles, 71. In the San Joaquin Valley, a little bit of trapped cold air, keeping the temperatures in the mid-50s. Dense fog advisories were in effect this morning in San Diego and Los Angeles due to a strong inversion. Wood-burning bans are in effect in all of the valleys, including the coastal areas and the Inland Empire. Further up north, wind advisories tonight into tomorrow morning for the central coastal range near San Luis Obispo. Northeast winds 30 miles an hour, gusting to 45. And a bit more cloudy up in Oregon and Idaho as that moisture pushes in from the Pacific. Winter weather advisory for the Cascades, northern Oregon, and southern Washington, looking for about 48 inches above 2,000 feet. In Idaho, we've got winter weather advisories today and tonight all through the Snake River Valley, including all the way out to Wyoming, Jackson and Yellowstone National Park. Into tomorrow, a foot of snow expected there. Elsewhere, in the lower elevations of the Snake River Valley, close to the interstate, some of the precip may be in the form of rain and mixed phases. Let's take a look at our atmospheric river setup because, it does get busy sometimes this time of year, especially on the West Coast. Not much going on. This is kind of a dry pattern, but some of it trying to sneak there into Oregon tonight and tomorrow. There's another push for tomorrow afternoon into the southwest that dies on off. The flow turns more out of the south, and then another push for Friday, and that covers much of the coast there. Out in the eastern U.S., dry with cold and dry advection coming in from Canada, and in Texas for Saturday. Return flow trying to get established and bringing up some moisture from San Angelo, Abilene, up to Oklahoma City, 600 IVT values for late Saturday. And we do have to look at other charts, but this can be indicative of development of shower activity. And certainly looks like it with 700 starting to show up there. This is probably suggestive of a low-level jet, which has been established. And yeah, there it is for sure. This might raise the possibility of severe weather for late in the weekend in the southeastern U.S., and it is that time of year. So that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. Everything moves on off for late Monday and then Our focus goes once again to the west coast. Another system up there lingering off of Washington, and another surge of moisture in Florida for late week. But, this is a offshore baroclinic weather system, Arctic air filtering in across Texas. And on the other side, you have the opposite, deep tropical flow. So there could be some severe weather in Florida with these dynamics. This is reminiscent of March 13th of 1993, the superstorm that did get some severe weather going. And of course, the other question is, what's going on with that Arctic air? Let's check out the Pacific and Alaska. The storm track is open. I think that system might be going more into British Columbia, maybe overriding this cold dome. We'll have to look at the surface charts for that, but Alaska is cold. Lots of below zero conditions, 13 at Anchorage, and much warmer down on the Kenai Peninsula. Minus 26 at Barrow, minus 20 at Fairbanks, and we start getting into the bitterly cold air in Yukon, minus 36 at, is that Mayo or Teslin? I forget which one it is. But they do have extreme cold warnings, Environment Canada in the Mackenzie River Delta and Basin, and up there near Old Crow. Up there in the high Arctic of Canada, temperatures are falling down into the minus 20s and minus 30s. And great depth because the thickness values are indicating this bullseye across a very wide area. Hudson Bay vortex right there, and you can see that's also wrapping some deep, highly modified tropical air, which is lifted northward. Consequently, Iqaluit is up to 30 degrees. It's kind of strange thinking that is warmer than, say, Chicago. Very weird. All right, elsewhere. Well, I'm not going to go through all the Canadian warnings, but they do have lake effect snow advisories in the usual areas downstream from Lake Huron. Those run for at least the next couple of days. They're expecting up to a foot of snow there. And the other issue is temperatures. These are the model-derived temperatures. These orange colors are very significant because that indicates minus 30 to minus 40. And if we have yellows starting up, that's even worse. We don't see that very often. Typically, the orange is about as bad as it gets. So this is where we're at right now. Some of that purple and blue extending into central Canada, that is also very cold air down to about zero. So going forward through the rest of the week, quite a significant chunk of Arctic air across a very wide area. Typically, we don't see it this large. However, not a substantial push southward. The pressures are really a factor in whether that comes south, and we're only seeing 1036, 1040 millibars, and we do want to see that up near 1050 to really drive that into the U.S. So anyway, this will come south, especially with this Hudson Bay vortex. So that's all linked up to bring cold air into the Great Lakes area and more on tap. Regeneration of Arctic air up north going into early next week, and we see 1040 millibar high across the Canadian prairies, and eventually this does dislodge and start moving south for late in the week. And if you look at the winds, this whole area here has a significant northerly component. So that's all coupled, and that should help kick that air south into much of the central and eastern U.S. for later next week. All right, let's look at that forecast for the rest of this week and going into next week. This is what we have right now. There's that Alberta Clipper developing in Nebraska and starting to move eastward overnight. You can see that band of snow moving across the Omaha, Sioux City area, and then across Des Moines early tomorrow morning. Cold air pushes into much of the Central Plains for tomorrow. Texas sees a slight warm-up into the 60s across much of the state, and much colder up in North Dakota. Big surprise there. Single digits all the way down to Bismarck, 10s elsewhere. In the southwestern U.S., same old story. San Joaquin Valley, fog. Southern California coast, fog. And 70s inland, so very much like what we had today. Extensive rain all through the northwestern U.S. Snow levels in Oregon start topping out at 7,000 to 8,000 as that substantial warm advection gets going. Further up north, snow levels a little bit lower. Then we go into Friday. That remnant of that Alberta Clipper moves into the central Appalachians, the Allegheny region, New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and brings scattered snow across that area. Cold air mass expands into the northern plains, below zero in North Dakota, single digits, down into Minnesota. In the northwestern U.S., the snow levels start falling off again later in the day as cold air starts building in. Then for Saturday, Alberta Clipper number 2 starts developing in this area right here. The current GFS has that forming a little bit further south in Oklahoma for early Sunday. Cold air remains entrenched in the northern plains and expands across the Great Lakes, a modest southward extent, the freeze line running from about Philadelphia to Knoxville a little bit further south and up to Louisville, St. Louis, and Topeka. And along that freeze line, looking at snow and mixed precipitation forms. And we see that system moving eastward, spreading snow into northern Missouri, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and continuing on into Virginia for Monday. More cold air coming south, big old 1040 millibar high, 510 decameter thicknesses, and the 540 line down to the Red River. And this is interesting. Little system coming together there in the southern Rockies, strong baroclinic development. And you can kind of see what that's doing right there. Substantial isentropic lift and baroclinic development out there in West Texas, and spreading this shield of snow across Texas. Now, really what's going to happen depends on how much cold air flows southward, how much dry air. I've seen a lot of events when this kind of thing happens that the snow amounts are much less than what's forecast. We really need those baroclinic processes to be rather close to the snow area. You can see this system off to the south is pretty far out there. So I'm not really too sure about any substantial snow amounts, but this is 174 hours out. A lot of questions about the depth of the cold air, the characteristics, so we can't really forecast this far out. I'm seeing a lot of posting on social media, people claiming to know what's going to be happening next week. This is, to me, it's like throwing darts at a dartboard in a pitch black room and debating what's the best strategy to score exactly 301 points. You just can't really do that this far out. We're going to have to wait until at least Saturday to really get a handle on how this is all going to play out, the cold air, and of course the wintry precipitation. So a lot of unknowns, and this is going to flip-flop from model to model for the next 3 days. So we'll see about that. Anyway, basically a non-zero risk of wintry precipitation in the south, and you can see more cold air coming south for late in the week. This could be another doozy of a cold air mass. We'll just have to wait and see on that. But you can see out to the west, though, significant warm advection. This indicates that the depth of the cold air, the amount that it's building to the south and southwest, it's just not really there. This is not, a bulldozer type cold air outbreak like we saw in 2021. But again, this is 240 hours out, so we're just going to leave it at that and check it out again on Friday. Back on Monday, we showed the Patreon supporters how the charts are put together. If you want to catch that special show that we've never really done before, head to Patreon and get signed up, and then check through your Patreon feed for that program. I do want to thank our 2 new Patreon supporters, Herb and Michael Bellis, and thanks to Roger Caleza for the increased pledge. It has not gone unnoticed. Very much appreciated. All right, hope you have a great rest of your New Year's Day, and we'll see you back here on Friday. Take care. Bye-bye.